Hello, dear friends. Opinion piece. Possible global collapse. An economic crisis could be looming. Volatile October in the stock market. Preparing for a black swan event. The two West market crashes occurred in October. A global energy crisis is only the first of many. Oil prices reach multi-year highs. Bottlenecks in supply chains persist. The energy crisis is turning into a food crisis. Colombia-Venezuela crossing reopened after years of closure. IMF cuts its global growth forecast for this year. Big retailers are chartering ships to avoid blockades. Evergrande is not the only Chinese real estate company in trouble. European Union cuts its list of tax havens following Pandora's papers. There were at least 330,000 cases of pederasty in the French Catholic Church. Constitutional Court declares illegal the closure of the Congress of Deputies in Spain. Taiwan claims China will have full-scale invasion capability by 2025. Time has sped up and nothing and no one can derail the Creator's plan. Let's start. The next global financial crisis is fast approaching, according to William H. Buiter, professor at Columbia University. Central banks must prepare because global stock markets and real estate would be overvalued, while leverage is near record levels for households, corporations, banks, and governments. Since early 2020s, central banks in advanced economies have had to choose between parsing financial stability, low inflation of 2%, or real economic activity. Without exception, they have opted for financial stability as the first priority, followed by real economic activity, with inflation in last place. Central bank responded to the crisis with unprecedentedly aggressive policy to ensure financial stability. But they also went far beyond that what was required, removing all policy constraints to support real economic activity. Central banks were right to prioritize financial stability over price stability, considering that financial stability itself is a prerequisite for sustainable price stability and full employment. Sooner or later, China's housing bubble and the household debt secured against it are likely to collapse. Add to that a sharp reduction in China's growth rate due to demographic and business hostile policies, and the world economy has lost one of its engines. They could wait for 2% inflation targets and maximum employment, but financial stability cannot wait. Evergrande is not the only Chinese real estate company in trouble. Chinese luxury real estate developer Fantasia Holdings missed a $206 million bond payment on Monday. Fantasia Holdings said it missed the payment due on Monday, raising fears that debt problems among China's real estate companies could spread far beyond China Evergrande. Energy crisis. Global energy crisis would be the first of many. The world is going through the first major energy crisis of the clean energy transition. It wouldn't be the last. The shortages rocking natural gas and electricity markets from the UK to China are unfolding just as demand recovers from the crisis. But the planet has faced volatile energy markets and supply constraints for decades. What is different now is that the richest economies are also undergoing one of the most ambitious overhauls of their energy systems since the dawn of the electric age, with no easy way to store power generated by renewable sources. All of this is happening at a time when energy consumption is projected to increase by 60% by 2050, as the world phases out fossil fuels and switches to cars, stoves and heating systems that run on electricity. Continued economic and population growth will also drive consumption as the world moves further into all things digital. It will mean that this increased vulnerability comes at a time when people need reliable power more than ever. Increased demand for electricity combined with fuel price volatility means that the world could be in for an unstable period for a few decades. The consequences are likely to range from periods of energy-driven inflation, which will exacerbate income inequalities, to the looming threat of power outages and loss of economic growth and output. The planet's energy systems are interconnected, so the crisis and its repercussions are being felt around the world. The crisis has had knock-on effects across industries, obstructing silicon production, disrupting food supplies, and hindering supply chains. Bottlenecks. Bottlenecks in supply chains would persist. Although companies may be struggling with unexpected cargo delays, supply chain bottlenecks may not be resolved into the short term. Container ships have been delayed for days at major West Coast ports, and trucking routes have been at maximum capacity due to labor shortages affecting the industry. The current situation is a crisis of epic proportions, and it is actually getting worse. Walmart, Target Home Depot, and other major retailers are leasing ships to avoid supply chain problems. Leasing a ship could cost millions per month, making it an option only for retailers with the greatest financial resources. Major retailers with a lot of money are using their considerable financial resources to avoid a holiday season supply chain disaster, but it comes at a cost. The cost of leasing a ship ranges from $1 to $2 million per month, plus operating costs, including the cost of renting containers. Major retailers use between 500 and 1,500 containers per month. Criticism of air transport restrictions. The director of the International Air Transport Association, Willie Walsh, stated that unnecessary restrictions that countries maintain on international air transport will cost the sector $40 billion this year and delay recovery. Problems. Volatile October in the stock market. The two West market declines occurred in October. Stocks are already having a rough October in 2 trading days. October is the most volatile month for stocks, and when stocks suffered their 2 worst declines in market history. Not many investors in today's market remember the trauma of Black Monday. It is very important to prepare for so-called black swan events such as market crashes that would be sudden, horrible, unpredictable, and rare. The New York Stock Exchange could be on the verge of a painful quarter, once renowned finance professor Jeremy Siegel, in quotes, "We will be in trouble down the road," the expert declared. He stresses that inflation could become a much bigger problem than the Fed thinks. He adds that there will be pressure on the Fed to accelerate the stimulus reduction, but the market wouldn't be ready for such an outcome. U.S. trade deficit. The trade imbalance in August hit a record high, having widened by another $3 billion or 4.2% as relatively insignificant gains in exports were swamped by much stronger growth in imports. IMF cuts its global growth forecast for this year due to high inflation. Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva warns of the danger that higher than expected inflation will cause central banks to raise interest rates and further depress growth. The International Monetary Fund expects global economic growth in 2021 to fall slightly below its July forecast of 6%, citing risks associated with debt, inflation, and diverging economic trends. Markets. New York Stock Exchange closes sharply higher as tech giants roar back. Wall Street closed sharply higher Tuesday as Microsoft and Apple led a strong rally in growth stocks, and investors awaited monthly payrolls data later this week that could influence the Fed's decision on when to taper monetary stimulus. Stocks futures hold gains after Nasdaq's best day since August. Stock futures opened in slightly positive territory Tuesday, holding gains after a tech-driven rebound rally during the regular session. That sent the Nasdaq up to 1.3% in the index's best day since August. Investors eye big tech as stock market falters. Technology stocks are bearing the brunt of a recent wave of market selling, highlighting how a prolonged downturn in the sector could affect broader stock indexes. Federal debt limit expected to be raised to avoid default. Moody's Investors Service said Tuesday that the stable outlook on the U.S. AAA rating reflects its view that the country would raise its debt limit and continue to meet its debt service obligations on time. Oil hits multi-year highs. Oil prices rose on Tuesday, with crude oil hitting its highest level since 2014 and Brent futures climbing to a 3-year high after the OPEC producer group stuck to its planned output increase rather than raising it further. Cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin soars again to $50,000. Excuse me. The world's largest cryptocurrency in terms of market value surged on Tuesday, passing the $50,000 mark for the first time in 4 weeks and adding to this month's gains due to growing institutional interest. Bitcoin to become a legal payment in Brazil. Brazil's federal deputy Aureo Ribeiro, has revealed that Brazilians could soon be able to buy houses, cars, and even McDonald's with Bitcoin. The South American nation is preparing to vote on a cryptocurrency regulation bill that is expected to be presented to the Chamber of Deputies plenary in the coming days. Maintenance bug cost 6-hour Facebook outage. Routine maintenance on Facebook's network linking its data centers caused its global system to crash Monday for more than 6 hours, the company said Tuesday. Europe. European Union cuts its list of tax havens after Pandora Papers. The European Union has cut its blacklist of tax havens just 2 days after the Pandora Papers scandal broke. Anguilla, Dominica, and Seychelles are no longer considered as non-cooperative jurisdictions. European Union investigates complaints that Russia is fueling gas price hikes. The European Commission is investigating complaints from some European countries that Russia is using its position as a supplier to drive up gas prices in Europe. France threatens to cut power supply to UK Channel Islands over fishing licenses. France has said it could cut power supplies to British Crown dependencies in the English Channel to put pressure on London in a dispute over fishing licenses for French boats. At least 330,000 cases of pederasty in the French Catholic Church, report says. A report shocks the French Catholic Church. An independent commission reveals that at least 330,000 cases of abuse or violence of minors or vulnerable people have taken place in the country's dioceses since 1950. The investigation has pointed to more than 2,900 pedophile clerics. The French Catholic Church says it is devastated, while the Vatican has released a statement from Pope Francis where he expressed his sorrow for the facts. French bishops ask for forgiveness. A representative of France's Catholic bishops apologized Tuesday to victims of clerical sex abuse after a report was published on the extent of abuse going back decades. Vatican prosecutors admit gaps in cases. Prosecutors in Vatican trial of 10 people accused of financial crimes, including a cardinal, acknowledged weakness in their case Tuesday and said they were willing to return to the investigation phase to fill in gaps contested by the defense. Ukrainians uncover Jewish hiding places in city sewers during Nazi Holocaust, and that the cobblestone streets of the west Ukrainian city of Lviv, excavators have discovered new hiding places in subway sewers where some Jews managed to flee Nazi occupation forces during World War II. Spain and America. The TC declares unconstitutional to close the Congress of Deputies. The plenary of the Constitutional Court has concluded this Tuesday that the decision of the Bureau of Congress to give a close and stop the clock of the lower house was unconstitutional, considering that it violated the rights of the deputies. The border crossing between Colombia and Venezuela reopens after years of closure. The border crossing between Colombia and Venezuela began begins its slow thaw with the opening of the Simón Bolívar and Francisco de Paula Santander international bridges to allow the passage of heavy cargo vehicles between Cúcuta and Táchira state. China. Taiwan assures that China would be capable of invading it on a large scale in 2025. Taiwanese Minister of Defense Chi Kuo-cheng affirmed that China would be capable of organizing a large-scale invasion of the island by 2025, and stressed that the relations between Taipei and Beijing are going through their worst moment in 40 years. China's plan to bring artificial intelligence under control. China's government presented what would be the first ethical guide for handling artificial intelligence, which stresses that the system leave full control to humans, a document similar to Isaac Asimov's Laws of Robotics. Quantum transition. The Great Quantum Transition. Algorian update by Lev. In October 3rd, 2021, at 9 o'clock in the morning, the ships carrying the Earth into 5D frequency orbit transmitted the new information in quotes. We have entered a zone of shifting energy platforms. The charges are increasing. The incoming rays have a strong effect on the whole planetary complex. They create an ironing effect on the quantum particles by condensing them by strong pressure. This is how the plasma energy comes out during the compacting of squaring operations of the Earth's 4D space. Currently, work is being done in two directions: regulating excessive stress through the lunar base and extracting plasma through distribution channels in spacecraft modules. During the great space passage, where quantum flows are dissected and condensed, the fractionation of energy by vibrational levels continues. In your world, you feel with your cells all the quantum processes of the planet. This is how the law of the greater cosmos works. The small corresponds to the large. The Earth is undergoing worldwide quantum changes in all its systems and organs. Her consciousness is filled with the crystalline purity energies of Source. The power of the planetary crystal and all high-speed highways in the ray transport system have been increased. The equipment for energy flow management, scanning and monitoring of the Earth was replaced and upgraded given the new situation on the planet. The Earth's field is continuously saturated with cosmic energy from the star Oryx in the space in which the planet moves. This is how the whole energetic structure of Gaia is updated and the fractal of the fifth dimension is built. The conditioning of the sixth dimension continues. The platform of the first dimension has been replaced by the second dimension. The quantum level of the Earth has been qualitatively raised. The sound of the planet was raised an octave higher. The leakage flow from the third dimension to the fourth dimension accelerated. Earthlings' bodies are decompressing to stay in the fourth dimension. In many, a crystalline body is forming. Every cell of the human being's organism resonates with the transformation program. Your ailments prove it. The radiant energy of hydrogen intelligence pours over the planet. It loads packets of information into your brain block that signals for the rearrangement of DNA and RNA A. This restructuring is already occurring in about one third of Earth links. At the quantum level, the Earth is actively rebuilding itself and is ready for ascension for a long time to come. Unfortunately, the consciousness of a significant part of the population doesn't correspond to it and greatly slows down the processes. But no matter how hard the opposing forces tried, they only accelerated their departure. Opposition to them is only increasing. The critical point is approaching. No one and nothing can derail the Creator's plan. Time has accelerated, as have all processes on the planet. You are the children of Earth. Their influence upon you is great. Your thought forms translate into space. Only those who accept them will advance further on the path of evolution. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.